pushed me 2 skirts, one short, one long as the bottom of a gown, and I said...
For decades, Barbra Streisand said almost nothing about the man who shared the screen with her in one of the most emotionally charged romances Hollywood ever produced. The Way We Were wasn't just a movie. It was a cultural moment, a love story so raw and unforgettable that fans around the world still talk about it half a century later. But what most people never knew is that the chemistry between Barbra Streisand and Robert Redford wasn't entirely acting. Behind the scenes, there was real tension, real affection, and a real connection that never fully healed. Redford, famously guarded and private, kept his distance from Hollywood spectacle. And Streisand, despite her success, always seemed to carry something unresolved in the way she spoke about that era, or more precisely, the way she avoided it. Over the years, interviewers tried to press her, fans speculated, but she held her silence. She never confessed what she truly felt about Redford. Not when he retired, not when he disappeared from the public eye, not even during the emotional moments that would have invited reflection. Until now, after his tragic passing, Streisand finally broke the silence she'd held onto for nearly 50 years. And what she said, and didn't say, has left even the closest insiders stunned. Her words weren't grand or dramatic. They were careful, quiet, and filled with the weight of something left unsaid for far too long. This wasn't just about loss, it was about regret. About history. About a bond she never fully got to understand until it was too late. And when you hear what she finally revealed, you may never see their love story the same way again. They met not as strangers, but as legends in the making. Barbra Streisand, already a force of nature, bold, brilliant, and endlessly dissected. And Robert Redford, the golden boy of Hollywood, elusive, graceful, and emotionally untouchable. When they came together for The Way We Were, it wasn't just casting, it was fate daring 2 icons to collide. But from the moment they shared the same frame, something deeper stirred beneath the surface. Barbra, ever emotionally open, brought raw vulnerability to the role of Katie Morosky. She wasn't acting. She was revealing. Redford, in contrast, played Hubble like he lived his life, charming, cool, and distant. And that emotional asymmetry wasn't just written into the script. It was real. Barbra was completely enthralled by Redford's mystery. She wanted more than chemistry. She wanted connection. But Redford, wary of overexposure and famously private, kept walls around his heart that even Barbra couldn't climb. Behind the scenes, their energy was electric, but never reckless. There was mutual respect, admiration, even deep affection, but there was also caution. Redford never allowed their bond to blur into anything Hollywood could turn into gossip. He insisted on boundaries. He remained emotionally contained. And while Barbra followed suit, her longing for something more, something real, seeped into every scene. The pain in Katie's eyes wasn't just acting. It was Barbra channeling something deeply personal, something she could never fully explain. Redford's silence off-screen left a void that mirrored their characters' doomed love, and Barbra, though respected and revered, found herself alone in that emotional space. She would later admit in carefully chosen words that he never gave her everything. Not in real life, and not even during filming. And yet that's what made The Way We Were unforgettable. It was heartbreak filmed in real time. 2 people who could never truly meet in the middle, whose souls brushed but never bonded. Even long after the cameras stopped rolling, the echo of that dynamic haunted her. Barbra would speak of Redford only in passing over the years, praising his talent, his professionalism, his presence, but always with restraint. There were no stories of late-night talks, no tales of post-set romance. Only silence. And in that silence, fans wondered, had something happened? Was something lost before it ever began? Decades passed. Both stars continued their careers, lived their lives, married other people. But the image of them together, Katie and Hubble, Barbra and Bob, refused to fade. People didn't just watch The Way We Were for its story. They watched it for the truth they felt humming underneath. A truth that never quite had words. And Barbra, perhaps more than anyone, understood that some emotions are too sacred or too painful to explain. So she didn't, until now. What makes this story so haunting isn't just the emotion on screen. It's the emotion that never left the screen. For years, Barbra Streisand carried a kind of reverent silence when it came to Robert Redford. She praised his work, acknowledged his beauty, his power, his calm, but she never pushed beyond the boundaries he'd laid so carefully. Redford had always been intensely private, almost unreachable in his self-containment. Even at the peak of his fame, he was known to vanish between projects, retreating into quiet, into nature, into a life deliberately untouched by the glitz that defined everyone else. Streisand, on the other hand, was public, political, passionate, a woman who thrived in the spotlight and often paid the price for it. And maybe that was part of the reason they could never fully meet as people, even when their characters seemed to touch something universal. Barbra once said that she tried to understand him, to peel back the layers, but he never fully let her in. During the filming of The Way We Were, she would sometimes reach for him emotionally, only to find he'd already withdrawn, offering a smile or a kind word, but never the deeper presence she craved. It wasn't cruelty, it was protection. Redford protected his solitude the way other actors protected their image. And Streisand, already bruised by years of being misunderstood, felt that wall in her bones. The quiet after the film wrapped was louder than applause. No confessions, no closure, just a beautiful performance and a permanent distance. Over the years, rumors would swell. Stories of a romance that never happened, or perhaps one that did, but was never acknowledged. Barbra refused to play into it. She never gave the tabloids what they wanted. And maybe it was because that story belonged only to them. Or maybe it was because it was never quite finished. Then came the news of his passing, and the moment... Barbra broke her silence. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't long. Just a few words posted with a photo. I'm heartbroken. He was my Hubble. He will always be. And with that, the world gasped. Not because it was unexpected, but because it was everything we feared and somehow always knew. It was confirmation that the connection we saw was real, and that the silence was not indifference, but something closer to mourning. She had carried that weight for decades, the ache of something that almost was or could never be, or maybe simply was never meant to survive outside the frame. And if you're beginning to feel just how deep this story runs, deeper than gossip, deeper than even love, then take a moment to like this video. Subscribe to the channel for more untold Hollywood stories, and leave a comment below about how The Way We Were impacted you. Because this isn't just about two actors. It's about time. It's about loss. And it's about the kind of bond that can live quietly inside someone for a lifetime, without ever being named. As the years passed and both Barbra Streisand and Robert Redford carved out legendary careers, the silence between them remained untouched, as though preserved under glass. There was never a falling out, no public rift, no bitterness, just distance. And in that distance, a mystery. Streisand, never one to shy away from politics, public life, or artistic risk, continued evolving, directing, producing, singing, performing with boldness and purpose. But whenever The Way We Were came up in interviews, her tone would shift. Something would tighten. She spoke of the film's success with gratitude, but rarely offered more than a sentence or two about her co-star. And yet in a few rare interviews over the decades, her restraint cracked just slightly. Not in gossip, but in glimmers of regret. She once admitted that Redford was the one she had wanted for the role so badly. She personally lobbied for him, even fought the studio to get him cast. She knew that only he could be her Hubble. And yet, when asked whether they ever grew close off-screen, she paused, smiled quietly, and said, "Bob is very contained." That single word, contained, said more than paragraphs ever could. Streisand is a woman who loves expansively, who sings from the center of her soul, who performs with heart bleeding from every lyric. Redford, by contrast, was all still water, composed, restrained, enigmatic. That contrast may have made their chemistry iconic, but it also made true connection impossible. In her later years, Streisand would speak openly about the loneliness of fame, the way her intensity often scared people off. And though she never named him directly, fans and insiders alike could sense that Redford lived somewhere inside that ache, an unspoken figure in a gallery of unresolved moments. Perhaps most telling of all was Streisand's recollection of the final scene in The Way We Were. That iconic moment where Katie smooths Hubbell's hair, says goodbye with tears in her eyes, and walks away into the past. Barbra confessed that she didn't have to act in that moment. She was truly heartbroken, not as Katie, but as herself. It was the goodbye she never got to say in real life, the closure that never came. Redford, true to form, kept his distance even as the credits rolled. He was respectful, always professional, but unreachable. And Barbra, for all her strength, carried that quiet disappointment with her. Not as a wound, but as a weight, a what-if she never got to put down. Over time, her body of work grew. Her accolades piled up. But there was always something tender in the way she spoke about that film. Something unfinished. Not in the performance, but in the story behind it. She never sought to rewrite history or pretend there had been more than there was. But she also never let it go entirely. Some love stories don't happen the way we want. Some connections never bloom, and some truths are too delicate to say aloud. But when Robert Redford died, something shifted. Barbra Streisand, who had kept that truth sealed for decades, finally opened the door. Just a crack. And what slipped through wasn't a confession. It was a sigh. A heartbreak that had waited half a lifetime to breathe. In the end, the story of Barbra Streisand and Robert Redford was never about romance, at least not in the conventional sense. It was about timing, temperament, and two people whose hearts beat to very different rhythms. Streisand has never claimed that Redford broke her heart, only that he never let her all the way in. And now, with his passing, that door has been closed for good. But in the days that followed the news of his death, Streisand's silence finally cracked wide enough to let just a few rays of long-buried emotion escape. She posted a photograph of them on set, back when they were young, and the world was still unfolding before them. The caption was short, but the weight behind it was undeniable. "I'm heartbroken. He was my Hubbell. He will always be." It was the first time she had ever said it like that, without scripts, without layers, without the practiced distance of a veteran performer. It was as if Redford's death had given her permission to finally admit what had always been unsaid, that he had mattered to her in a way that transcended co-stars, scenes, or cinema. That somewhere, beneath the restraint and missed connections, there had lived a tenderness that never died. Since then, Streisand has spoken quietly but more openly about their time together. Not in long interviews or tribute specials, but in small moments, passing comments, softened smiles, memories laced with a grief that feels more personal than professional. And for fans, those glimpses mean everything, because we always suspected there was something more. Not scandal, not secrets. Just two complicated souls who brushed against something profound and then walked away from it because neither one knew how to hold it. Redford's passing has cast a long shadow over Hollywood, a reminder that the golden era is dimming, that the icons we grew up with are becoming memories. But in Barbra's mourning, something deeper is happening. She is, perhaps for the first time, allowing herself to grieve not just the man, but the chapter. The version of herself that existed when they made The Way We Were, young, hungry, hopeful, and open-hearted, is now gone too. And what remains is a woman reflecting not only on a career, but on a connection that never fully came to life. Redford was, in her own words, contained, and Streisand, so full of intensity and truth, was left always wanting just a little more than he was ever willing to give. Yet she never blamed him. She never villainized him. That was never her way. Instead, she honored him, in silence, in longing, in restraint that matched his own. And now, in his absence, she is honoring him still, by finally giving voice to what once went unsaid. For the rest of us, their story lives on in a film that refuses to fade, a single performance that continues to break hearts, generation after generation. And maybe that's fitting. Maybe the reason The Way We Were still matters is because it was never just acting. It was two people telling the truth, without ever having to say it out loud. And maybe, just maybe, Streisand's final goodbye, decades in the making, is the moment we finally understand what we were all feeling the entire time. That some love stories aren't meant to be lived. They're meant to be remembered.